You're looking for a cutter that actually works day to day, not just a list of numbers on a spec sheet. You want something that stays on when the shop gets busy, that doesn't need a PhD to set up, and that won't bleed your budget dry for a few extra amps you'll never use. That hesitation is real. Spending a few $100s on a CNC plasma cutter that ends up gathering dust is a pain you've probably felt before. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started digging into the 120A plasma cutter market, the first thing I noticed was how many kits promise industrial-grade performance but ship with a tangled mess of wires, an oversized controller, or a torch that needs constant tweaking. The Cut 120M from Gopkstzel tries to sidestep those headaches by bundling the torch, power supply, and a CNC control board into a single package. The idea is simple: you get a plug-and-play system that you can mount on a small shop table and start cutting thin sheet metal in under an hour. Who should consider this machine? If you're a hobbyist or a small business owner who regularly works with 10mm to 20mm steel, aluminum, or mild steel plate, the 120A rating gives you enough punch to slice cleanly without burning the edge. It's also a solid fit for anyone who already has a CNC controller and just needs a reliable plasma source. There's a 6M torch cable that plugs straight into most hobby-grade motion controllers, so you can keep your existing software stack. On the flip side, if you run a high-volume production line or need to cut exotic alloys like titanium on a daily basis, you'll likely outgrow the 120A headroom and the relatively modest duty cycle. Let's talk about setting it up. The box arrives with the power supply, torch, a compact CNC interface, and a short guide. I was surprised at how little wiring was required. The power supply has a single 3-phase input, but the unit also runs on standard single-phase 220V if you're on the West Coast, which is a nice safety net. You mount the torch on a standard CNC gantry, connect the 6M cable to the controller, and power up. Within 10 minutes you have a ready toolkit system. The only quirk I ran into was the initial arc start calibration. There's a small potentiometer on the torch that you need to tweak until the plasma ignites cleanly at the lowest amperage. It's not a big deal, but it does add a couple of minutes the first time you fire it up. In real-world use, the cutter shines when you're making parts for a custom bike frame or cutting panels for a small trailer. The plasma stream is tight enough that you can get a 2mm kerf on 12mm mild steel, which means less material waste and less post-cut grinding. I tried a 45-degree bevel cut on a 15mm aluminum sheet, and the torch held its shape without excessive dross. The fine-cut torch really lives up to the fine claim when you dial the amperage down to 60A for thinner materials. That flexibility lets you switch from heavy-duty steel to delicate aluminum without swapping heads. However, there are practical downsides that matter once the excitement fades. First, the duty cycle is limited to about 60% at the full 120A setting. If you try to run long, continuous cuts, say, a 2-meter straight line on a thick plate, the unit will overheat after a few minutes and shut down until it cools. For occasional hobby cuts that's fine, but a shop that needs to run long production runs will have to pause frequently or invest in an external water cooling add-on, which the kit doesn't include. Second, the included CNC interface is decent for basic motion but lacks advanced features like adaptive height control or built-in voltage monitoring. If you need precise height compensation for irregular workpieces, you'll have to add a separate sensor or upgrade the controller. Lastly, the torch's consumables, electrodes and nozzle are standard, not proprietary, which is good for cost, but they wear out faster when you push the machine at 120A for extended periods. Expect to replace them roughly every 4,050 hours of cutting, something you have to budget for. From a value perspective, the Cut 120M's price point lands it right between entry-level hobby kits that often omit a proper power supply and high-end industrial units that run into the thousands. You're paying for a ready-made power source that can handle a decent thickness of metal, plus the convenience of a matched torch. If you compare it to buying a separate MIG welder and a generic plasma torch, you actually save a bit on wiring and compatibility headaches. The real value shows up when you consider the time saved on setup and the reliability of having a matched system. In my tests, the machine stayed in tolerance after a week of intermittent use, and the arc didn't wander, a common problem with mismatched power supplies. Who should skip this kit? Anyone whose primary material is stainless steel or copper will find the 120A rating underpowered for clean cuts, as those metals demand higher amperage and better heat control.